The rain came down in sheets that Tuesday evening, the kind of relentless downpour that turns city streets into rivers and makes you question every decision that led you outside. Sarah Chen stood at the bus stop, watching the water cascade off the shelter's edge, her phone clutched in one trembling hand showing the text she'd read 17 times. "Mom's in ICU, come now." 3,000 miles separated her from that hospital in Boston, and she had exactly $47 in her checking account until Friday. The last bus of the night pulled away from the curb, its red taillights blurring through her tears, and she realized she'd never felt more alone in her entire life. She'd moved to Seattle 6 months ago, chasing a dream that had already begun to unravel. The tech startup that promised her the world had downsized last month, keeping only the senior developers. At 26, she was back to waiting tables at a diner on Pike Street, smiling through 8-hour shifts, while her computer science degree gathered dust in a drawer. Her mother, the woman who'd worked 2 jobs to put her through college, the woman who'd never once complained about the sacrifices, was fighting for her life, and Sarah couldn't even afford a last-minute plane ticket. The shelter offered little protection from the wind-driven rain, and Sarah's thin jacket was already soaked through. She should go back to her studio apartment, that cramped space with the leaking ceiling and the heater that only worked when it felt like it. But somehow her feet wouldn't move. She stood there, frozen by a grief and helplessness so profound it felt like drowning. "Miss, excuse me, miss?" Sarah looked up to find an elderly woman standing beside her, holding a clear umbrella that seemed absurdly cheerful in the gray gloom. The woman was small, maybe 5 feet tall, with silver hair tucked under a rain bonnet, and eyes that crinkled at the corners with a lifetime of smiles. "You've been standing here for 20 minutes, dear. I saw you from across the street. Are you all right?" The kindness in her voice shattered something in Sarah. The tears came faster, and she found herself telling this stranger everything, about her mother, about the money, about feeling like she'd failed at the one moment when success mattered most. The words tumbled out in a desperate rush, and the old woman listened, really listened, with a focus that made Sarah feel seen in a way she hadn't in months. "Come with me," the woman said when Sarah finally fell silent. "I'm Margaret, and I think we can help each other." Sarah hesitated. She'd lived in cities long enough to know about stranger danger, but something in Margaret's face, something warm and genuine, made her nod. They walked 3 blocks to a small cafe, its windows glowing with yellow light, and inside Margaret bought them both hot tea. "I can't give you $3,000, Margaret said, wrapping her weathered hands around her cup. "I'm a retired teacher living on a pension, but I can give you something else." She pulled out her phone, an older model that she handled with careful deliberation. "I have 7,000 followers on Facebook. Not influencer numbers, but these are real people. My former students, their families, friends from my church. Let me tell them about you." Sarah wanted to refuse. Pride is a fierce thing, especially when you've been raised to handle problems yourself. But then she thought of her mother's laugh, the way she'd hum while cooking dinner, the feeling of her hand smoothing back Sarah's hair when she was sick. Pride seemed small compared to that. Margaret worked quickly, her fingers moving with surprising speed across the phone's keyboard. She wrote about meeting Sarah, about a daughter's desperate love for her mother, about the kindness of strangers and the power of community. She included Sarah's Venmo handle, after asking permission twice, and hit post before Sarah could change her mind. "Now we wait," Margaret said. "And while we wait, you tell me about your mother." So Sarah did. She talked about growing up in a tiny apartment in South Boston, about her mother's hands, always rough from cleaning other people's houses. She talked about the birthday when she was 10, when her mother had saved for months to buy her a used laptop, sparking a love for coding that would shape her life. She talked about the last time they'd spoken, just 3 days ago, when her mother had said, "Don't worry about me, sweetheart. You just take care of yourself out there." Margaret's phone began to buzz. Then it didn't stop. The first notification was from a former student. "Sent $20. My prayers are with you both." Then another, and another. Within an hour, the phone was chiming constantly. $20, $50, $10 from a high school kid who added, "This is my allowance, but your mom sounds amazing." $100 from a woman who wrote, My daughter lives across the country, too. I can't imagine. They sat in that cafe for 3 hours, watching the donations climb. Margaret showed Sarah each message, and with every one, Sarah felt the weight on her chest lighten. These were strangers, people who had no reason to care about her or her mother, giving what they could because someone had asked, because kindness is contagious, because humanity at its best is a beautiful thing. By midnight, the total had reached $1,400. It wasn't just Margaret's network anymore. People were sharing the post, and their friends were sharing it too. Someone in Minnesota sent $50. A retired nurse in Florida sent $100 and wrote about losing her own mother. A college student in Oregon sent $5 and apologized that it wasn't more. Sarah was crying again, but this time the tears felt different. Cleaner somehow. At 2 in the morning, the total hit $2,000. Margaret, who had stayed with her the entire time, was practically glowing. "Look at that," she whispered. "Look at what people can do." But then something unexpected happened. A notification popped up from someone named David Chen. "This is Sarah's cousin. I've been looking for a family for years. I'm in Boston now, at the hospital with Aunt Lynn. She's stable. She's asking for you. I've already booked you a flight for 6 a.m., tickets in your email. Come home." Sarah stared at the message, her mind struggling to process it. A cousin? Her mother had rarely talked about her family. Fragments of a history Sarah had never fully understood. And he was there with her mother right now? Her phone buzzed with an email confirmation. A ticket to Boston, leaving in 4 hours. Margaret reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. "Some things," she said softly, "are meant to be." The cafe owner, who'd been watching from behind the counter, brought over a bag. "Coffee and breakfast sandwiches for your trip." "On the house." Sarah made it to the airport in a cab paid for by Margaret, who refused to let her take the bus. At security, she turned back to wave, and Margaret was still there, her small figure somehow commanding in the fluorescent light, waving back with both hands. The flight was a blur. Sarah couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, could only think about her mother and this cousin she'd never met and the hundreds of strangers who'd cared enough to help. When she landed in Boston, David was waiting at baggage claim. He looked like her, or rather, like what she imagined her mother looked like as a young man. Same eyes, same shape to the smile. "I've been searching for you. Both for 3 years, he said as they hurried to his car. "Your mother and my father had a falling out before we were born. I never knew I had an aunt until I started digging into our family tree. When I saw that Facebook post, saw her name, Lin Chen, and Boston, I knew." Her mother was awake when they reached the ICU. Weak, connected to machines, but awake and smiling through oxygen tubes. "Sarah," she whispered. "My girl, how did you—" "People, Mom. People helped me." In the days that followed, while her mother recovered from the heart attack that had nearly taken her life, Sarah's inbox filled with messages from across the country. People sharing their own stories of struggle and unexpected kindness. A woman in Texas who'd been helped by strangers when her house burned down. A man in Michigan whose community had raised money for his daughter's surgery. A teenager in Nevada who'd been given a winter coat by a teacher who'd noticed he was cold. Sarah responded to every single one, often late at night in the hospital waiting room. She thanked them not just for the money, but for reminding her what the world could be. And slowly, something shifted in her understanding of success and failure, of what mattered and what didn't. Margaret flew out to visit 2 weeks later. When Sarah's mother was moved out of intensive care, the 3 women sat together in that sterile hospital room. And it didn't feel sterile at all. It felt full. David came too, bringing his wife and 2 children Sarah hadn't known existed, and suddenly family wasn't a small, fragile thing, but something expansive and growing. The extra money people had donated, the amount that pushed past the cost of the ticket, Sarah put toward her mother's medical bills. And when people kept giving, kept sharing the story, kept adding to the fund that Margaret had set up, Sarah made a decision. She started a foundation, small at first, to help other people in crisis afford emergency travel. She called it the Margaret Fund. 6 months later, Sarah was back in Seattle, but everything was different. She worked part-time as a developer for a nonprofit, building the website and infrastructure for the Margaret Fund, which had already helped 63 people reach sick loved ones. Her mother was recovering well, visiting frequently, marveling at the daughter who'd found her purpose in the darkest moment. And Margaret? She was the fund's volunteer director of outreach. Her Facebook following now at 20,000 and growing, each person part of a web of kindness that spread further every day. On the anniversary of that rainy night at the bus stop, Sarah wrote a blog post that went viral. It wasn't about the money raised or the people helped, though those numbers were impressive. It was about the title she'd learned people deserve, the one she'd give to every stranger who'd helped her. Human, not donor. Not savior, not hero, just human. Doing what humans do best when we remember we're all connected. Reaching out, caring, giving what we can, when we can, because someone needs it and we have it to give. She ended the post with a question that thousands would share. Who titled you as worthy of help? Who did you title as worthy of your help? What if we stopped asking and started acting? What if we all just were? The rain still falls in Seattle. The buses still run late. Life is still hard, money still tight, and tragedies still strike without warning. But Sarah Chen stands different now. No longer alone at the bus stop, but connected to a vast network of humanity she hadn't known existed. And when she sees someone struggling, lost in their own storm, she does what was done for her. She stops, she asks, she helps. She titles them the only thing that matters. Human, worthy of love, deserving of kindness. Part of the same story, they're all writing together, one small act at a time.